and welcome to all of you here in the room and all of you who are joining us online to this intriguingly entitled session, Lost Einsteins, and we'll be discussing diversifying innovation. My name is Magdalena Skipper. I'm editor-in-chief of Nature, a weekly science journal. Many inventions, such as GPS, circular saw, submarine telescope, life raft, electric toothbrushes, would not be here, or at least would not have been invented when they were, had it not been for women inventors, individuals with disabilities, or inventors from otherwise underrepresented groups. If we just focus on women for a second, 31% of R&D positions in science globally are filled by women. But only 24% of positions of leadership in technology industry were occupied by women last year. And in fact, I myself am the first woman editor-in-chief of Nature in its 154-year history. Things get really bad, though, by the time you get to VC funding of startups. In the US, 2% of such funding went to startups founded exclusively by women. And if you look at startups founded exclusively by Black women in the US, that 2% drops to 1%. We know there are great opportunities in R&D because funding in R&D is growing globally. And of course, we want better innovation, and better innovation means more diverse innovation. So the question is how to make the most of these investment opportunities. And by making the most, of course, I mean making innovation greater and therefore more diverse. And this is indeed the question I'll be discussing here with this excellent and diverse panel. So let me introduce them to you, starting on my right. I have Maria Leptin, who is president of European Research Council, a premier funding science agency. Then further along is Thomas Lamanauskas, Deputy Secretary General-elect of International Telecommunication Union, a UN specialized agency responsible for materials relating to information, for matters relating to information and communication technologies. Next to him is Amy Braccio, who is Global Deputy Vice Chair of Ernst & Young, and then Kevin Frey, Chief Executive Officer of Generation Unlimited, a public-private youth partnership anchored in UNICEF. Welcome to all of you. So let me start with you, Maria. Your focus is on fundamental research funding. Can you share your perspective on how diversity may be important in generation of ideas from this fundamental perspective?
Yes. So just briefly, the ERC, which I preside the Scientific Council of, and of which I'm the president of the whole organization, funds fundamental research that is purely bottom-up. So it's researcher-led. It funds researchers' ideas based only on excellence, which can be seen as a challenge for generating diversity among the pool of grantees, if we're allowed to ask by law to fund only by excellence. As it turns out, this is just a brief preamble, the number of women among our grantees has been growing steadily, especially in the younger cohorts. We're thinking it'll filter through to the higher cohorts. And the granting rates are approximately similar. So in research, I think it is perfectly clear that diversity of ideas is essential. You don't stew in your own juice. If you do, you're not going to discover anything new. And so one cares a lot for diversity. New new communities come up with new ideas, which is best seen in the success of interdisciplinarity. So I think it's important for researchers to take that into account, and I think they do. We see this, I can speak from my own experience as a researcher in genetics and other aspects of the life sciences. We do see our own groups being fertilized by ideas that come from people that don't fit into the normal fold. It's hard to do this top down, because you don't know where the new ideas are coming from. So I really think the idea of in funding fundamental research, in finding ideas, is to let the researchers speak and select the best ideas without preconceived notions.
Thank you. Really interesting point that it's hard to engineer it, right? Top down, as you said. Thank you for this. Very important background, and I love the sort of metaphor you used about it not being a very good idea to stew in one's own stew. Clearly, that's limiting. Thomas, what does inclusive innovation look like from ITU's perspective?
So thanks very much. And I think we're back to that word of diversity, that having those sort of views of ideas. And I think that's where inclusiveness is the way to achieve that diversity. So, and I think from us, and there's some elements are easier than others. So of course, in terms of, let's say, nationalities and different parts of the world. So we, by default, are an organization that combines all the world. So in 193 countries, just in our staff, we have 99 nationalities. Of course, still not fully there yet, with 193, but it's pretty diverse that way. But then, of course, there's other aspects. And here, probably still easiest and the most to concentrate on gender, and I'll kind of have a few points there. But, of course, I think as we move now, it's definitely not the only remaining frontier that we need to capture. But in terms of gender, I think it's also, there's enablers for that diversity that need to be existent. So first of all, if you look from our kind of top-line perspective, is just general access to digital, and we still have the gap there. So 63% of women versus 69% of men online doesn't seem that huge, but when you look in different parts of the world, that starts increasing. In the least developed countries, only 3 out of 10 women are online. So that clearly starts limiting ability to contribute to the markets and innovation. And then at the same time, you look different aspects, at least, we're looking innovation through the lenses of technology, market, and policy, and you look at all these levels, you have that skewed situation. If you talk about policy leadership, only 16% of ICT ministers around the world are women. So clearly, we have a few, I think here, even in these rooms today, but generally it's just a few. If you look at the markets, so at least, for example, Europe, 50% of startup founders are women. The technology you look at only 20% of ICT specialists, 30% of in STEM education, women in STEM education. So clearly all these skewed elements across the board. And of course, why do we need to achieve that? And I think that's maybe just hooks. Of course, this is a matter of justice, and I think that's also sometimes important to remember. It's like the first level is that this is a human rights issue. Then the second level, of course, is elimination of negative, and especially when we start talking about innovation now, about AI-driven innovation, about others. Where if we don't have everyone included, then we start having AI reflecting those who are included, and as well as other technologies. So I think it's not new to AI. If you look, I remember. Someone was telling that even seat belts are designed for men, by men for men, so it's kind of differently work on the car safety bags are also designed by men for men, even though we don't think about that. But I think when we go in some areas like AI, we're starting to suddenly see that, like when, which pronouns AI chooses or picture selects when someone asks for CEO to be shown. And as well as, of course, there is a positive impact. And again, some studies show that, if we increase in Europe women participation in tech force by 45%, we'd have 260 to 60 billion euros positive impact. So this is like a global, then maybe just a few words that we still have our own challenges ourselves as an organization. So both in our delegates, we are a rather techy organization, and it's definitely not an excuse, and that's kind of probably later on we'll talk about some solution. But if you look at even our participants in the more generic conferences, which is our plenipotentiary or policy level conference, we have 1/3 of women, but the sooner we go more engineering fields like, radio communications related conference, then we drop around 20-25%. and so on. And the leadership positions in the education sector, again, around 20%. So clearly a lot of road to be traveled. When we talk about our staff, it's also important to look behind headline figures. You know, if I gave you the headline figure, it would be 52% of our staff are women. The problem is, you know, out of administrative staff, 68% are women, and out of, if you kind of, as you climb the hierarchy, you'll see that pyramid is very, very clearly changing. And we did quite a bit of effort in the last few, in the last 5 years or so. And you see in our so-called director or leadership level position, we have doubled, our Secretary General now is a woman, which is, I think, is also a symbolic achievement, but there's definitely a lot yet to go to really have that, fully inclusive environment that then can create this diverse innovation that works for all.
Thank you, Thomas. You touched on a couple of really interesting and important points. Well, you touched on many interesting, important points, but what really rang for me, you talked about access to knowledge, and of course, access to knowledge and benefit from knowledge is part of the Helsinki Declaration of Human Rights. And then access to knowledge is, of course, an ability to contribute to that knowledge growth, which, of course, is what we're discussing here. And on the subject of images that we expect, or pronouns that we expect to use, I would like to propose that we rename the session from Lost Einsteins to something like Lost Marie Curies, or Lost Gladys May, or somebody like that, speaking of information technology. Amy, I want to come to you. And so I understand that back in 2021, EY launched its first neurodiverse Centre of Excellence in the UK, which is where I'm based. What have you learned from this experience, and how are you taking this forward?
Yeah, so thank you. And notwithstanding that we just renamed the session, I did think it might be good to start with an Einstein quote, because it resonated with me. So we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And I think that sets the stage for a lot of what we'll be talking about. We recognize, as I know all of you do as well, the world has big problems that we have to tackle, and we're not tapping into all of the talent sources that we have around the world. So we at EY, one thing that's important to understand is we're a purpose-driven organization, and our purpose is building a better working world. And I say that first because thinking about things like diversity and inclusiveness and innovation, it's not something we think about off to the side. We think about it because it really is core to who we are and what we do. One of the things that we're most proud of with respect to innovation in this space are our neurodiversity centers of excellence. So while the first in the UK was in 2021, the first that we did around the world was in the US in 2016. And so what we found was that you had this population of talent, the neurodiverse, that had skills that were really in demand, especially if you look at things like data and analytics, and they were underrepresented in employment. And so we launched these centers of excellence. We're now up to, 8 countries and 19 cities around the world, and 400 people have been hired in, where we create the environment in which these team members can thrive. And as a result, we've seen $650 million in process improvement generated through the ideas and the work that this team has done. We also do a lot on this intersection between diversity and inclusiveness and innovation through our commitment to corporate social responsibility. So for example, one of our key areas of focus is ensuring that we help accelerate impact entrepreneurs. And so we have something that we call our impact hives, where we open it up to all of our 400,000 employees around the world to be able to listen to the challenges that an impact entrepreneur faces and do real-time innovation and idea sharing such that that impact entrepreneur can then take that away to help accelerate their business. And the last example I'll give is that we've recently launched what we call our EY STEM app. And it's very much to get at partially what you were talking about in encouraging girls into the fields of STEM. And so we launched it initially across 50 schools in India and the US, and it provides gamified learning to encourage entry into these fields. And now it's available around the world. And so those are just a few examples of what we're doing, and hopefully that sparks ideas for others.
Thank you. I want to come back to you for a little bit more information on the neurodiversity initiatives. So maybe you can share with us a little more in practical terms, so we can see how we can sort of take a leaf out of your book. And then I'd love to come back to the app that you just mentioned about getting girls into STEM. I think some of the questions, some of the challenges is how to keep them in STEM. Sometimes we forget about this. But let me turn to Kevin first. So Gen U, which I think is how you like to refer to yourselves, your mission is to unleash the full potential of the world's young people. How do you do this? And how can the rest of us draw inspiration from your approach?
Yeah, so our mission is to skill and connect the world's 1.8 billion young people. That's how many young people are on the planet right now to opportunities. And I think, on today's topic of innovation, young people are often left out of the conversation. But in the first instance, it's actually good for business. McKinsey put out a study in 2021 that 58% of companies that included young people in their product design were able to maintain 10% growth rates or greater, compared with only 23% of companies that didn't have young people involved in new product design. So it's good for business, fine. But I actually think the young people who are left out and the extraordinary opportunities that there are in the world are young people in last mile communities. It's the majority of work that we do in the global South. If you think about the problems and the challenges facing the billions of people living in the global South, in towns and in villages, you need to empower young people there to solve those challenges. So then the question is, how do you catalyze innovation with these young people living in towns and villages and last mile communities, facing challenges that really the rest of the world is not grappling with? And what we've seen at Gen U is that social entrepreneurship, so empowering these young people, because there's not big formal employers in these towns and villages. So it's not corporations that are going to solve a lot of these problems, even though some of these solutions could have billions of customers down the road when solved. It's going to be young people. They're smart enough, they're hungry enough. We've often, I'm sure many of us have heard that necessity is the mother of invention. Well, there's no more urgent place on the planet than what many of these young people are facing. So how do you do it? It's to empower via social entrepreneurship, and it's a very small investment. Often it just means a short boot camp, a tiny little bit of seed funding. I'll give two short examples. One, just this year we ran a competition across 40 different countries called Imagine Ventures, had over 1 million young people apply. One of the winners from Zimbabwe used local recycled material to create a lighting solution that they're now selling to schools and to local individuals that allows them to study once the sun goes down and to keep the school open, but it's actually profitable. Or another gentleman just 2 years ago in Kenya who started collecting organic waste in his informal settlement, turning them into little organic briquettes and selling that as clean energy. He now has 51 employees, and we made a $5,000 seed investment on his idea. So there's extraordinary opportunities for innovation to solve problems for literally billions of people, but we have to empower the young people in those communities to solve those challenges.
Terrific examples, and as you say, you're sort of almost getting two boxes there, right? The young constituents of the global population, and of course moving to the global South, the communities that have so much, the access to innovation opportunities is so much more difficult to them as well. Terrific example. As you are describing this, I was thinking, I'm thinking about Maria's focus on funding outstanding research and the wonderful ideas that the communities you engage with have. Do you see a way for researchers with formal training and formal setting of this world of tapping into that incredible potential?
So absolutely. In fact, the first three speakers before me, I saw incredible opportunities because, in fact, all three. So one, what these young people need, a little bit of seed funding, but mentoring, coaching, access to real researchers could be an extraordinary game changer for them. Connectivity. That's connectivity to new markets. So when they come up with a new solution, if we can get them connected, even a 2G, a 3G connection, they can start to sell their products, so connectivity. And then third, your impact entrepreneurs with EY. I mean, nothing better than people who understand business to coach these young folks who have ideas, but maybe don't know how to build a business model, don't know what a profit loss statement looks like, how do I market, what's an addressable market. Just a little bit of coaching from an EY professional can be the difference between them succeeding, scaling, and growing a business, or actually staying as just a kind of a small one-person shop.
That's great. I can see collaborations forming already. Just to tell you in the room here, there'll be time for questions in a few minutes, so please get yourselves ready with questions. But I have some more questions for my panel first. So, Thomas, can I come to you next? You listed a number of harsh realities about the percentages, the low representation of women in positions of leadership and so on, especially, for example, one statistic you brought up was ST ministers around the world. What about solutions? How are we going to change these, at least the individuals in power, so that, in position of prominence, so that we can have more enabled inclusive innovation?
Thank you very much. And I think one thing also is great to remember that I think we talk, this issue, we were dealing with this issue for not so that long ago, and that's kind of the pity. So we're now looking into so in ATU we celebrated 25 years since our first plenipotentiary resolution on gender, and I thought about that. I thought that's very short, so because that means 25 years ago that wasn't recognized as an issue, and that sometimes is surprising, sitting in this room here, even though our first women delegate was in '60s, so at least that's there. But then, of course, we need to resolve this issue. And I think that's where we're already starting talking, is about how you, first of all, is this partnership and collaborations and how you bring them together. So we have, and it's a bit of a pitch, we have Equals partnership where we work on different tracks with around 100 partners around the world, on access, skills, leadership, and research tracks, to really trying to both understand that we have a gender disaggregated statistics, from gender disaggregated statistics to specific actions on skills building. On the specific topic you mentioned on women ministers, we actually have network of women ministers, which is again, maybe returning having a women's secretary general helps to lead that and bring other leaders on board to inspire by example and also mentorship. We have network of women for now what sounds technical, World Radio Conference, which is probably the most technical part of the organization, where spectrum is negotiated and satellites being regulated, and that's where again increasing the already building around the women delegates who are already there, and through their own support each other, as well as mentorship program. Then going to specific areas, for example, on standards, we have a training program on gender inclusive standards. So again, trying to how do you do that as well, and both how you include women, but also how they reflect on use. Now back to entrepreneurship, and that's probably somewhere to work. So we have the initiative called the AI for Good, which is also will have a summit in a couple of months in Geneva. But as part of that, we have AI for Good Innovation Factory, which the idea is part of that is a competition to open for the startups using artificial intelligence, machine learning to look for the solutions. And that's again trying to encourage this grassroots innovations, and that's maybe something for us to work with Genuine about. And then similar way, we have Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator, where there's a a number of organizations joining hands together. And earlier this year, as part of then preparation for the Commission of Status of Women in New York, and then as a event itself, we had innovation. We had the Entrepreneurship Challenge, which again selected. We received 250 submissions and selected from 54 countries, and selected winning again women entrepreneurship solutions, and on different aspects of innovation. So these type of things, I think, help us to look through every layer, from the policy layer to expert layer to actually grassroots layer, and really try to achieve that. And of course, always good to remember is always looking inside, so making sure that their own staff policies, we achieve the same diversity. So of course here we have different ways to look at that. I think we'll be looking through our policies from recruitment to other ways, including secondments and internships and others, how we look through those. through the mobility policies as well, to exchange the staff around the organization, to really make sure that our staff body, not only in gender terms, but in other different terms, are as diverse as possible and reflect the world of today as well.
Thank you. And again, a couple of things struck me in particular. You mentioned, of course, entrepreneurship, which, according to the figures I shared earlier, is particularly painful underrepresentation of women, but of course other underrepresented groups. And then, of course, you mentioned AI for good, and what good means different things to different people, which is why you need to have that diverse representation, engaging in that definition, what is good. Maria, can I come to you next? So at least a couple of panelists referred to the fact that in order to have inclusive and diverse innovation and recognize its importance, of course, that needs to be recognized by a diverse group of people. How well do you think the research community is doing in this respect? Are we, and I include myself in that community, do we recognize that need for diversity sufficiently? Are we becoming sufficiently diverse?
You know, if you asked individuals, I would probably say yes. For the reasons I said, we notice it, then we have diversity in our environment, in our groups. It's good for our own ideas, it's good for thinking. From the, you know, I'm looking at it from the very top, from one of the most generous and prestigious funders in Europe, and we're just at the end of the pipeline. We can do very little, and this is something I wanted to get back to, and that's why I like the Zhang Yu approach. We need to start right at the very youngest, and we need to start in two aspects. The expectation. If the young only see the wrong kinds of people or only one type of idea among their teachers, in the textbooks, etc., that, of course, imprints something in their brains. And if they don't have the empowerment, and you mentioned that, it's really good. So we, you know, it's far too late at a funding stage to deal with this. And why is it important to enable, to empower, to open up the minds of all these? Because we actually don't know what's going to come from them. It's just like with scientific projects. We don't know whose ideas and input we're going to need then, like Einstein says, you know, we've crossed the trouble, let's ask others. But they've got to know, they've got to be given the chance even to get to the point where we will hear them. And I think most of us are far too high above that level. The other thing is, diversity is obviously more than just women. I've just counted among the room. Of the people in the room, there's 18 women and 16 men. So we're not, and 3 versus 2 up here. So clearly we're not doing that bad. If I see, if I look at the faces, at the skin colors, it's already less well balanced. If I look at socioeconomic backgrounds, which I can't see, of course, that's the trouble. We can't even see it at this stage. I'll bet you it's looking very bad. So I think we've got to get to a point where I just have no competence at all, where we even get the people to the point where they can participate in all these things we've said. So can we, in science, what can we do? As university professors, where we get them as first-year undergraduates, maybe, but it has to happen earlier. And we've got to have people with good ideas to get to those kids.
Absolutely, really important reminder, of course, that there are many axes to diversity, and we really want to create opportunities for all the different elements. And, you know, Kevin, you really spoke to this very, very convincingly. It's interesting, you spoke about, you know, the sort of end of the pipeline in research. As an editor of a journal, I'm arguably even further up this pipeline. But there are still, I can imagine certain types of flexibilities. For example, a scientific publication is structured in a very specific way. Authorship means certain things. But I can imagine having one of your young entrepreneurs, innovators, as a co-author on a paper. They don't need to have a specific type of training or specific even affiliation. If they've contributed to that research, they absolutely should be acknowledged. So I guess a little bit of imagination and flexibility wherever we are can add a little bit. But coming back to the different axes of diversity, Amy, I want to come back to you. I'm intrigued. Can you share with us more? In practical terms, you talked so nicely about creating that project that allowed you to create opportunities for neurodiverse communities and really unleash their potential to innovate. How did that come about, and what can we learn from it?
Yeah, certainly. It came about originally in one of our executives having close ties to a nonprofit focused on the neurodiverse community. And I think that sparked the idea for him that, look, there is this whole population of talent that we are not tapping into. And so we worked with nonprofit organizations to understand what conditions do you have to set in order to help the team members to really thrive. So if anyone spent any time in consulting, you'll know that it can be a little bit chaotic in general, like your normal consultant life. You can have to be anywhere at a moment's notice. You're in these big war rooms where everyone's talking at the same time, massive training, and I can keep going on. And that's not necessarily the conditions that would help the neurodiverse population to thrive. And so we worked on what's required. And so some of the things are sort of simple in that we call them a center because it really is a separate part of our office. And so it'll be a part of the office that is set aside and more controlled of an environment. So you can't just come in and come out at any time, and it creates a sense of safety and predictability in that area. The other thing, and this may not sound as innovative today, but it was more so in 2016, now we're used to everyone having their AirPods or something sitting at their desk. But in the past, that wasn't necessarily the norm. And so creating a situation in which if it's helpful to have noise-canceling headsets on to help support your work, then that was fine as well. And so we just created that environment, and we learned over time, and then it expanded from, started out in the US to, we have these centers all over the world. The other thing I didn't mention was the retention rate is sky high. So of the people we've hired, 92% retention. And if you think about what we just went through with the Great Resignation, that's massive in a field like ours.
That's really wonderful examples. Are there any questions or comments from the room? Maybe your own experience, something you want to contribute? Please go ahead. And if you can wait for the microphone, please. We have an online audience.
Hi, Pablo Salazar from Mexico.
Yeah, it's on.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and what you know. I agree that a great place and a great way to foster innovation is to involve entrepreneurs. It's not easy. We have been trying to do it in Latin America for the last 10 years. It's not easy from the academia. It's not easy for the corporates running into CVCs and kind of accelerators, but it's happening. So the only thing that I know for sure is that once it starts, it just gets better. So it's an open invitation for everyone around here to get involved as mentors, as friends of the startups, to be fostering and helping the founders, the young founders, specifically women, which is more difficult in terms of getting access to capital and getting access to mentorship. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? There's a lady at the front there.
Thank you for your incredible insights. I'm Sonia Shorey from Canada's Capital. I'm here from Ottawa. I lead our Women Founders and Owners strategy in Canada's Capital and work across the country with like-minded leaders like yourself. One of the biggest challenges that we are addressing is bringing more women into our investment landscape. How do we get more women investing at the angel stage, at the VC stage? I would value any insights from any one of you on any techniques or approaches that you've used, because we know when more women are investing, more women get funded, and the greater the diversity in terms of the investment community, the more diverse our founders.
That's such an important question. Would any of the panelists want to share anything? Or anyone in the room, for that matter? We are at the right forum, no pun intended.
Be nice if there were more very rich women out there who could fund. That would help for a start.
There's a comment or a question there.
Hi, this is Nini Wang from China, and my focus is longevity economy, and we have a steering committee meeting tomorrow, which I just wanted to also bring up and hear some of your comments, because since 2 years ago at the WSIS forum, we have seen the global innovation prize for healthy aging related projects, and we have seen the wonder of connecting the younger generation with also the aging population, not just looking at solutions to serve the aged, but actually looking at the new perspective that we're all going to expect to live longer. And I just wonder, because of the diversity we've been talking about, we have mostly talked about gender or economic background, etc. But we also, how do we also expect that once we live beyond, let's say, 90, 100 years, there will be a new type of challenge and new need for building the economy differently. And innovations actually could come not just by empowering the young or the female population, but people of all ages. Yeah.
An excellent comment, because of course diversity comes throughout the lifespan. So let's not forget that the older generation can also innovate, and I would bet this will be a complementary way of innovating to the very young. And of course there is an interesting synergy. Women tend to live longer, so maybe we can even combine the two. So any comment from the panel on including the innovation?
Go ahead, please. I can share an example of one of the things we've done. For our large, complex projects that we do for our clients, we oftentimes will assign a partner to be this independent quality executive. And one of the things that we found was we could be really successful going to our retired community and bringing back in retired executives, because they had a wealth of experience from across their career, but they also really had the time to be able to focus and be that mentor to the lead for the engagement. So it was a way to tap into another population and diverse ideas that we wouldn't have tapped into it otherwise, because they had retired.
That's a great point, and that actually brings me back to a point that I think we will sadly not have time to discuss, but we touched on this, and in the context of your app for bringing girls into STEM, and how do you keep people engaged? And so girls, of course, we know that intake into education in STEM is actually quite healthy in terms of gender balance, but then of course that peters away. So similarly with those who have retired, how do you bring back their expertise, tap into that in the context of mentorship, which you, Kevin, talked about earlier, how valuable that would be for the youth, especially in the global south as well. Really fascinating set of comments here. I have one quick question, perhaps just for one answer from one of you, and then just before we wrap up, I want to ask a question to each one of you. But the first one is, innovation often is defined in the context of application. I personally prefer a broader definition, but that's often defined. So is there a special role for public-private partnership in fostering inclusive and diverse innovation? Would anyone like to comment?
No, I think at least our experience shows there's no way around that, because I think that's where, that's kind of how you can achieve scale, as well, because I think the real change still will happen through both market applications, market, behavior, products, inclusion. So I think from the, so government's role is still mostly around the policy and setting right incentives and right policy, but you need markets to actually deliver. So I think that's natural. And again, maybe just punting around a bit, that's why this is like our DNA to do these things. So equals partnership from the very beginning is a a multi-stakeholder partnership where you have to bring everyone around the table to do their bit, from academia on a research piece to private sector. Also, thank you for mentioning WSIS process. WSIS Forum is again multi-stakeholder partnership where you have to have everyone there. So it even goes beyond public and private. It goes to what we call in UN multi-stakeholder, so that means civil society, academia as well. And inclusion in that way and diversity in that way is also probably part of inclusive innovation. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me turn to my final question. We've talked a lot about the issues, the problems which exist. It's very clear that we need inclusive innovation. We've talked a lot about quite promising initiatives, but we're clearly not there yet. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here discussing it. So can I ask each one of you to choose one thing that needs to change now in order for us to accelerate our progress? And Kevin, I'm going to start with you.
So I think when you're thinking about inclusive innovation and also game-changing innovation that can affect the lives of potentially billions of young people, billions of people, think about last mile communities. They don't have the capital, they don't have the access to mentors, governments aren't thinking about enabling environments there. If we can shift our gaze to the 50% of the population that's existing in these communities, there's extraordinary opportunities for innovation, for new markets, for the creation of wealth, decent livelihoods. So please, when we talk about innovation, try to shift your gaze south and to those communities outside of the major markets.
Thank you. Amy?
So many of us who are here are probably in a position of privilege within our organizations where we get to drive business change. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to think about the diversity of the teams that we put together to drive that change. And also reflect on where you come from yourself, and is there some blind spot you have in putting together a diverse team? So for me, I always try to make sure that I have people representing those who are doing business where English isn't your first language. And the other is people from developing markets, because we tend to be heavy, outside of that. And so I try to make sure anytime I put together a team, I'm covering those two spots. But think about, from your position, what are those aspects of diversity you need represented?
Thank you.
I think for me, and maybe it's also serving coming from ITU and our mission to connect the world, but I think giving tools to the people and really going there, so connectivity for me is still important, and ensuring that everyone has that access. And then you see the change starts happening. We talk about this investment and financial inclusion, and you see that once, for example, mobile money changes really perspective how women are empowered to manage their finances, so because they have that tool now that they can control, You see how giving access to the internet changes the way children access education and knowledge just by itself. Then you can add other layers. So I think sometimes, we need to go through the ecosystem and think all the initiatives we need, but we also need to remember it starts with just giving the tools and for the people to figure it out for themselves.
Maria?
Well, I'll mention the both ends again. The one end is, of course, where I wish something would be done. That is free kindergartens, free childcare, free education, everywhere for everyone. That will help. That will give people freedom to follow their wishes. And the other is, at the other end, the selection procedures and the condition for access. They're based on principles that were invented at a time when this was not normal, whether it's impact factors in publications or, the metrics that are used for judging excellence. We've just got to get broader, get no strings attached, to encourage people who may not feel the mold that was defined then, but is no longer relevant now. So we've done that at the ERC just now. I know many other research organizations have done that too. So I really say, get rid of the molds, get rid of the assessment criteria that are no longer fit for purpose.
Thank you very much. Thank you to my panel. I think what we've coming out of this conversation with is that to have inclusive innovation, we really need to open our minds. We need connectivity and collaboration. I thought we were going to come up with some other things, but I think these are really crucial things. And thank you for attending the Lost Gladys May session on inclusive innovation. Thank you very much. Thank you.